Today, we are going to completely demystify your monthly cycle. We're talking woman to woman about the incredible, beautifully orchestrated biology happening inside our bodies every single month. Far too often, we're left totally in the dark about our own anatomy. But by really looking at the science, we can gain true body literacy. So let's take a journey together to understand the phenomenal biological dance that happens inside you every single day. To make sense of it all, we're going to break down this complex system into 5 logical phases. Number 1, the brain's command center. 2, preparing the follicles. 3, the ovulation event. 4, the luteal phase. And 5, period or pregnancy. Let's dive right in. Phase 1, the brain's command center. We've got to start by shifting a major paradigm here. Most of us grew up thinking our reproductive system is entirely run by our reproductive organs, right? Well, actually, scratch that. Your ovaries aren't actually in charge of your cycle at all. Your brain is. We call this the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian uterine axis. I know, it's a total mouthful, but just think of it as a vertical chain of command that dictates your reproductive health. It starts right at the top with the hypothalamus in your brain, which sends messages to the pituitary gland sitting just below it. The pituitary then sends hormonal signals all the way down to your ovaries, which ultimately tell your uterus exactly how to prepare for a potential pregnancy. And here is what's absolutely wild to me. That hypothalamus, it is the true command center. It's the absolute master regulator of your sexual activity, your mood, hunger, temperature, the whole shebang. Yet it only weighs about 4 grams. That is roughly the weight of a single fingernail. This tiny little structure dictates the entire physical rhythm of a 70-kilogram person. Now here's where it gets incredibly relatable. The hypothalamus doesn't work in isolation. It's directly controlled by the limbic system, which is the part of your brain that processes your emotions, your moods, and your stress levels. Because our emotions directly control the hypothalamus, this physically proves exactly why a highly stressful month, anxiety, or an emotional disturbance can completely delay or disrupt your period. Your emotional health and your reproductive health are literally biologically inseparable. All right, moving on to phase 2, preparing the follicles. Let's look at how all these brain signals build into actual physical preparation inside your ovaries. We call this the follicular phase. Before we look inside the ovary, let's talk about the timeline. We always hear about the textbook 28-day cycle, right? Well, look at this. A perfectly normal, healthy biological range is anywhere from 21 to 35 days. Every single woman is unique, and anything within this range is just your body's beautiful individual rhythm. During this follicular phase, it's like a beautifully choreographed hormonal cascade. It kicks off in the brain when the arcuate nucleus releases a chemical called GnRH. That signals the pituitary to release FSH, or follicle-stimulating hormone. The FSH travels down to the ovaries to grow your eggs. And as those follicles grow, they start producing estrogen. That estrogen then travels over to your uterus to start thickening its innermost layer. What's really fascinating is that this phase is essentially a biological competition happening inside you. Every month, about 20 tiny primordial follicles start growing. But as estrogen rises, it sends a feedback message to the brain to turn off the FSH. Because the FSH drops, only the single strongest, most mature follicle, the graphing follicle, can survive without it. Only that dominant one gets selected each month, while the rest gracefully fade away in a natural process called atresia. Which brings us right to phase 3, the ovulation event. Let's dive into the dramatic climax of the month. This is literally the moment the entire cycle has been building toward. Right in the middle of your cycle, boom, a massive shift happens. Thanks to a sudden switch to positive hormonal feedback from those high estrogen levels, your brain releases a dramatic surge of luteinizing hormone, or LH. And I mean dramatic. It surges to 10 times its normal amount. This incredible 10-fold surge physically dilates the blood vessels inside the follicle and triggers digestive enzymes. These enzymes basically weaken the follicle wall until it physically ruptures at a tiny spot on your ovary called the stigma. The egg, or ovum, bursts out wearing this protective crown of cells called the corona radiata, completely ready to be beautifully swept up by the little finger-like projections of your fallopian tube. Okay, phase 4. The luteal phase. Once the egg has safely left the ovary, we enter this highly protective second half of your cycle. Now, fascinatingly, the leftover shell of that ruptured follicle doesn't just disappear. No way. Under the influence of the LH hormone, it swells up, accumulates cholesterol, turns bright yellow, and transforms into an entirely new temporary organ called the corpus luteum. This incredible little structure has one job and one job only: to pump out massive amounts of progesterone to keep a potential pregnancy safe. While the corpus luteum is busy pumping out progesterone, your uterus is transforming too. Your uterine lining, or the endometrium, is actually made up of 3 distinct layers. Under the heavy influence of all that progesterone, the middle glandular layer and the superficial compact layer get incredibly rich, filling up with coiled arteries and nutrients. Together, they form the functional layer, preparing the ultimate nurturing environment just in case a fertilized egg arrives. And that brings us to our final phase, number 5, period or pregnancy. Let's look at the final crossroads of our cycle and see how all this builds toward 2 completely different biological outcomes. Timing is literally everything here. If the released ovum isn't fertilized by a sperm, it only survives for a maximum of 48 hours in the fallopian tube before passing away. Just 48 hours. So here's the ultimate deciding factor between a period and a pregnancy. If an egg is fertilized and implants, it releases a hormone called HCG. Yep, the exact same hormone that pregnancy tests pick up. HCG sends a chemical congratulations message back to the corpus luteum, saving it so it keeps producing that protective progesterone. But if no message arrives within 10 to 12 days, the corpus luteum turns into a white scar, your progesterone levels drop, and it triggers your period. But what actually happens during menstruation? Well, when that progesterone drops, the blood vessels feeding your uterine lining basically shut down. This causes the tissue in those 2 upper layers to safely pass away, and they slough off as 20 to 80 milliliters of menstrual blood. Menstruation is simply the shedding of those functional layers over 4 to 5 days. Meanwhile, your deepest basal layer stays perfectly intact and safe, just resting and ready to start this beautifully orchestrated process all over again. Before we wrap up, you just have to see this timeline of the egg's development, called meiosis. It is absolutely mind-blowing to realize that the egg you released this month actually began its very first steps of development when you were still a fetus inside your own mother's womb. That biological continuity, connecting you to your mother and potentially to your future children, is nothing short of miraculous. I really hope this explainer has empowered you with true body literacy today. When we finally understand the profound connection between our brain, our emotions, and our reproductive organs, we can treat ourselves with so much more grace. I hope you're leaving this session in absolute awe of the phenomenal, delicate biological dance happening inside you every single day. So, my question to you is, knowing all of this, how will you listen to your body's rhythm differently this month?